All right, kinesiology 230, chapter 23. We're into resistance training still. Whoops, sorry about that. Resistance training for clients who are athletes. We're talking more about periodization of resistance training on page 623. Just for perspective, we listed out the main content areas of the book, and here we are, number 3 at this point on page 623. So periodization is the systematic process of planned variation and resistance training program over a training cycle. The goal is to manipulate the volume and intensity of the workouts and also the exercise selection. Your goal is to increase gains as well as reducing the likelihood of overtraining or injury. Now, they focus on two main areas or types, cycles and phases, and then variation and exercise selection. And with this, the cycles and phases part of it, you have microcycles, mesocycles, and macro. Micro being small, like a microscope. Meso, like a mezzanine, like a balcony, or a mezzo soprano, if you're into music, is middle. And then macro, like macro being like macroeconomics, large. So on a scale of big to little, and you'll be asked this in questions somewhere else, a macrocycle is the largest division. It's an entire training year. You might look at the Olympics and it's quadrennial, it's 4 years in duration. Mesocycles are kind of several weeks to maybe a couple months, and we'll talk more about that in my soccer programming example. And then you have microcycles, which can be 1 week to 4 weeks, and I would even say you have some, if not a lot, variation within the context of a training session itself. So big picture macro, little picture micro. And with this, I just want to point out that when you look at this, and we've already talked a little bit, and you saw some of that in that last presentation where I brought up 3 sets of 10, 4 sets of 10, 3 sets of 8, 4 sets of 8. You know, that was in the context of maybe an 8-week mesocycle, but each one of those workouts, 3 sets of 10, 4 sets of 10, 3 sets of 8, 4 sets of 8, then sixes, etc., all the way down to where we did sets of 4. Each one of those would be like a microcycle. Each one could be like its own weekly workout itself. So they talk about periodization model itself, and we may recall this from a color-coded example that I had talked about before, where you had hypertrophy on the bottom, then you have strength, power, peaking, and then the model I spoke of earlier was hypertrophy-based strength, power, peaking. And they talk about active rest, which is huge in what we do, and I'll bring that up in the soccer example. But you go through a mesocycle and you get done with a mesocycle, you have to have a week of active recovery and active recuperation. Even like you get done with a competitive season, you need a week of just like basic sweating activity that has nothing to do with your sport. Just something to kind of give your body, also your psyche, right? Your psychological side, a way to uncouple from the rigors of training. I don't care if you're training for a triathlon or training for the Shamrock Shuffle. You know, you get done with that, you have to find a way to kind of uncouple with some of the training that you did and be able to move on to the next thing. So with periodization, they get into variation and exercise selection. There's different ways to introduce variation to exercise selection. We've already looked at some of them in presentation number 7 out of chapter 15. I'll have a few more for you here that are kind of codified, and I hope they help you. But I'm going to jump into those in number 4. All right, guys, I'm going to break out of this. See you in a little bit.